Welcome everyone to today's webinar on how to give feedback to your team during performance reviews. This is one of those topics that I know is so important to our team members, to ourselves, to our company, our organization, our teams. And it's one of those that I feel like most people honestly never get any training around this. It's something that can be so impactful, yet is often kind of just assumed that we know how to do it. But there are so many big tips and tricks that we're going to cover today to make it even easier for you to have those conversations, whether it's the difficult part of the conversation of giving feedback to someone that maybe isn't doing as well as they need to be, or how to praise someone and recognize someone for doing a great job so that they continue to be engaged and show up to work excited and do a great job for you. So we have a lot to cover today. I'm going to be going through lots of slides today. I will ask that you save questions for the end. I will save some time, hopefully about 5-10 minutes at the end for questions at least. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to send me an email with whatever questions you have. I hope I can get to those afterwards if you're watching the recording. And then also I do have lots of opportunities for engagement throughout the session so that we can see and learn from each other what we're all focused on and different topics and how they're resonating with us. And again, if you're watching the recording, you won't be able to do the surveys along the way, but you will be able to see people's reactions on the screen. All right, let's get started. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Brittany Canaski, a leadership coach and trainer here at Hello Velocity. It is my own business that I've been running 5 years full time, and I started the year before that. And I absolutely love talking about all things leadership, performance, goal setting, and confidence. And I also have a podcast now this year that I started called the Hello Velocity Podcast, where I'm focusing on topics specifically for women in leadership to help them with topics such as confidence and work-life balance. And I'm just super passionate, if you can't tell, super passionate about developing leaders who are performing better both for themselves, their teams, and honestly for your families. Work-life balance comes up a lot for us. And I really, truly believe that we can work smarter, not harder, so that we're increasing our results and our performance without having to do it in such a hard way. And I mentioned this earlier, but I'm based here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I know we have a bunch of people from all over the world tuning in today, which is super exciting. So welcome everyone. And some other fun facts about me is I love to travel. I think I've been on 12 trips this year so far. And I love Formula One racing. And actually, fun fact is next week, I will be in Las Vegas for the Formula One race. So hit me up if anyone else happens to be there. That would be really cool. All right. So to get us started, I have these engagement questions and polls throughout our sessions to respond to this question. I would love to see what is the mix that we have here. How will you be delivering your annual performance review feedback to your team members? Is it in person, virtual, written, or a combination of more than one of those? All right. And then I see some people putting in the chat. We have in person, virtual. All right. So it looks like we're pretty spread out. A lot of different ways we're doing it. Okay. Their team is fully remote as well. All right. So keep this in the back of your mind as we're going through tips today. Obviously, you're going to need to tailor it based on the type of feedback you're giving. But it's good to see a lot of this is multiple types with the combination too. All right. And why is this topic so important? I found this study from 2024 about human-centered workplace, where they found that employees who strongly agree they get valuable feedback about their performance are 5 times as likely to be engaged. And we all know that engaged employees are more likely to do a better job. They're more likely to stay in their job. And honestly, I find they're just more fun to work with, right? They're more pleasant to be around. They're probably in a better mood and they have a better attitude. So another question we have here, what type of unhelpful feedback have you received from a boss? So I know if you're filling this out on your phone, it's probably going to jump to the next question. So we have one already in here. If this is your mistake, you need to figure it out yourself. Whoop, it's a bit harsh. I know I've heard a few examples recently as you're thinking about these different types of feedback you've received. I've heard some recently where actually someone got written feedback and they could tell it was copied and pasted from someone else's feedback because it actually had the other person's name in it. So it's still copy and pasted with someone else's name. So they knew that their boss did not customize it at all for them. Ooh, keep doing what you're doing. Yes, the very generic feedback doesn't really mean anything. It's both not super helpful. It's also like not that much recognition. Ooh, no specifics, just feelings. Yep, I see that. We will cover all of these today. Feedback without them understanding the scenario. Ooh, that one's tough too when they're usually removed from your day-to-day work, but then they're giving you feedback on it or maybe what you could have done differently, and they might not know all the specifics of what actually happened. That's tough. Yeah, I know I've gotten a lot of the keep doing what you're doing or the you're just not quite there yet for a promotion when I asked about that in the past. That was, again, not very helpful. All right. So again, I think most of us have experienced what it feels like to have unhelpful feedback. It can feel really demoralizing. It's, again, not helpful. Like, what are you supposed to do with some of this? You can't really measure some of this. It's hard to decide what to do next about it. So, this is why, again, why this is so important and why we want to have really intentional conversations with our team members. So, what we will cover today to help you with a blueprint of how to have these conversations. First is the giving meaningful recognition, then delivering feedback with impact, then developing your team's growth. And again, I'll leave some questions or leave some time at the end for questions. So, first off, giving meaningful recognition. And also, I forgot to mention, there is a free download I'll share at the end, and that has all of the key topics we're covering today in a one pager with examples. So I want it to be your one page cheat sheet that you can use whenever you need to in the future. So don't feel like you have to scramble to take all these notes if you don't want to, but we'll have that for you at the end. All right. When we're giving recognition, first off, I want you to be specific. And a lot of the examples that we just saw of unhelpful feedback, this is the core piece of what we see over and over again, is that a lot of times when people are giving feedback or positive feedback, it's really vague. So we want to share specific skills and strengths that they have within specific examples of where they shine. Now, obviously, we want to do multiple, especially for an annual review. So before, like something we would probably hear before this type of a training, someone would say, "You did a great job in the sales report." Sure, that's nice to hear, but is it really that helpful? And after, when we're being more specific, that would look like, "Great job on the monthly sales report. Your attention to detail in the report is incredible. I also appreciate how easy it is to read." So we're getting more specific with the skills and the strengths that this person shows so that they can really get to know themselves better, even of how you see them and how you see that they're shining on the team. Next is sharing the impact. This one I see often gets overlooked as well as helping them see the greater impact that these strengths have on the team, clients, yourself, or the organization. So, what that could look like is, again, instead of saying something as simple as "thanks for your help in the report," you would then say something like, "Tom mentioned to me that he appreciated your attention to detail in the report because it saved their team hours of editing." So, a lot of times when we are in the weeds of a project and we may know that we have good attention to detail, or we know that we did a good job on the report or people liked it. But a lot of times we're so in the weeds that we're not thinking about what happens after we finish a report. We're not thinking about the people that it's impacting or what they're doing with it once we send it to someone. So getting that from someone else that can see that impact allows us to then see it too and makes us feel more part of the team. It makes us more excited, more motivated to keep doing it. All right. And our third piece here for giving our productive feedback and recognition is acknowledging them. So this is a slightly different angle of what we talked about earlier. I like this to be more about a specific attribute or quality that you see in them. And it's a way to continue what's working and, again, motivate them in a different way. So what that would look like, instead of "keep up the good work," which we've all probably heard, again, the generic one-liners, you could say something like, "Your work ethic is so strong. I see how hard you're working every month on this report, and we all really appreciate it." Doesn't that just feel so much deeper and more personal to hear that from someone? So again, these are all just one specific example that I'm walking you through, and it's on the free download. But I want you to see this before and after and how much deeper we're getting with someone. And it's only a few sentences. It's really not that hard for you to come up with these examples, I'm sure. And just think about what you really appreciate about this person, what their skills are, and what these attributes or how they show up on the team or what you see in them. And I think this is the one that really can go a long way of helping them feel seen too on the team. All right. So I know we're here to talk about annual performance reviews, but I really want to emphasize that we need to be giving these specific types of feedback all throughout the year. So a few ways to think about it, or a few ways to help you do that. First, we want to think about, how does each person prefer their acknowledgement? And these are questions that you could have with the individuals on your team, because some people prefer it in person, some people prefer it in writing, in email, over Slack, and then some people want it in front of the team, some people want it one-on-one. It really does depend on the person. So ask that of the people on your team, how do they prefer to be acknowledged? And then you always want to be keeping track of wins, progress, and achievements. And these could be the emails that you're sending to your team members to acknowledge them. It could be when you're sharing in a team meeting that someone's doing a good job. Maybe just keep track of them somewhere on your back end, because then it will also make the annual performance review season so much easier for you that you already have all of these specific examples mapped out. And you're not sitting at your computer around this time of year trying to think about what you all did in January, because that feels like 5 years ago to most of us. And then lastly, of course, we want to be recognizing the team wins and milestones all throughout the year. So whether that's, again, in a team meeting, we're giving everyone different shout outs throughout the year. And the key here, I want to emphasize, is that we don't want to wait until the end of a project that gets done to celebrate it. Let's celebrate the key milestones along the way of anything along the way, maybe monthly, quarterly, things like that. So we're not waiting to just celebrate things once a year. We need more motivation than that. And we need more excitement and fun on our teams for sure. All right. So another question when it comes to these three areas for giving recognition on your team, which of the three do you need to focus on most? Being more specific, sharing the impact, or acknowledging them? All right. Yeah, sharing the impact, I guess, is the highest, but we're all still pretty spread here. So I hope, again, with the free download, this will be something to keep at top of mind before you go into those conversations, or when you're writing that feedback, that you can share that impact or be reminded to share the impact and acknowledge them. All right, moving on to section 2. This one, we're going a little bit deeper. The first one is relatively easy. I feel like giving recognition is usually the easier, more fun part. So we maybe focus on that. But a lot of people struggle with giving constructive feedback that is meaningful. So we're going to cover this from a few angles today. First things first, we've covered this a little bit earlier, talking about unhelpful feedback we've gotten, but I wanted to think about all the different angles that I've seen unhelpful feedback to get it more specific for all of you to think about. So things to focus on, doing this versus not that. First, we want it to be relevant to their work and not something personal about them. So an example would be something that is relevant would be saying your customer service skills aren't yet where they need to be. Let's create a plan for how to work on those. Something personal that you wouldn't want to say is that you're not likable. That one I've also heard a lot from people. Another example here, we want it to be measurable, not vague. So something measurable would be improving your response rate by 10%. And a vague example would be that you need to do better. That one I also hear a lot. That is not helpful. We also want it to be applicable, of course, not something outside of their control. I think someone gave an example like this earlier too. So applicable, again, maybe improving a sales conversion rate versus something outside their control, saying that a key client is a loose cannon and that we can't seem to move forward on our work because of client. Well, that's more on the client than it is on me. So why am I getting that as feedback? And specific versus generic phrases are idioms. So we've given a lot of specific examples already, but calling out specific skills I think would be helpful, like improving your sales skills versus generic phrases. I think we shared a few of these at the beginning, but some of them, like you need to step it up or you're not quite there yet. Some of my least favorite ones that I hear. And then lastly, we have equitable versus not being biased. So equitable, again, keeping it something very skill-based, applicable to the work, versus something that's biased is, we're going to cover this on the next page too, but there's a lot of stereotypes that different language that tends to be used for different stereotypes or different types of people. So another one that I hear a lot is that women get feedback that they're too emotional. And that's something that is not helpful and it is more personal. And it's something, honestly, you would probably never say to a man. So it's something that shouldn't be shared in a performance review. So a few other examples of this specifically is some of the stereotypes that tend to come up in performance reviews. And I have a few examples here. So some 56% of women surveyed said they've been described as unlikable in their performance reviews, and 78% have been called emotional, while 16 and 11% of men, respectively, said they've been similarly described. And this is one of those that really personally bothers me. Of course, being a woman, I've heard plenty of these things myself, and a lot of my clients who are women or a lot of my friends, we've all heard different variations of this. So it's very, very much everywhere, prevalent still. And our second one here, white and Asian men receive the highest quality feedback, and half of them said they've been called intelligent compared to less than 20% of Black and Hispanic Latino workers. And this study, I think, was in the US specific. I know we have a lot of international people tuning in today, but I'm sure there are similar stats across different countries. Unfortunately, this is just something that is really prevalent right now. And I would say, again, the recommendation that I like to think about when it comes to this is, would you give that feedback to someone of a different sex, of a different race? And thinking about if there's certain language or certain words that you tend to gravitate to for certain types of people. And yeah, gut check yourself, challenge your what's coming up for you, and see, maybe even talk with other people to see, what's true for them and how you could get support on this topic. Next up here is, this is another piece that I hear from people, how they tend to give this feedback when it comes to constructive feedback specifically. We kind of have the two extremes here that I see most people kind of falling into. We have people tend to avoid it entirely, or they tend to be too blunt. So these are two extremes. Avoiding, typically you're doing this because you think you're protecting the person. You don't want them to feel bad. You don't want them to not like you. So you just kind of brush it under the rug, and maybe you don't have that conversation with them that they need. But obviously when you're doing this, the problems aren't going to get fixed, and it's going to erode the trust between you two over time. And then the other end of the spectrum, when you're too blunt with someone, it can feel really harsh from the person receiving it, of course. And it usually doesn't get through to them when you say things too bluntly. And it's going to break that trust pretty quickly too, if you're giving feedback that's really blunt and it's really, really not helpful. So what we want to do instead is have productive feedback conversations where these are really intentional. You're prepared for the conversation. You're really specific with next steps, building on all the things we've talked about already. And this is going to help you build trust with the people you're working with, because you're supporting them in a really intentional way, and you want them to do better, and you want to be there to support them and be their supporter, their champion, their cheerleader. So when it comes to these different types, or these two extremes of feedback, where would you say you land on the spectrum of you tend to avoid it, or you tend to be too blunt or direct with your feedback? Interesting. No, it's good to know. So we will go through our framework of how to be more in the middle with intentional, productive feedback. And again, this part will be on your download so that you have it to reflect on in the future. So the first thing I always recommend when you're having constructive feedback conversation with someone is to prepare in advance. So we don't want to just jump into this conversation. You don't want to be blunt and just catch them right after the meeting in the hallway and grab them and say, "Oh, you didn't really do good on that presentation. Like, you should do better next time." That's not what we're looking for here. So we want to come prepared before the conversation, have specific projects, examples, people involved, especially when it comes to these annual performance reviews. I want you to do the homework ahead of time, look at, your different projects you've worked on together over time, look at the timelines and emails involved, and have that kind of those facts in the back end for you. And it may sound counterintuitive, but I do like you to start with something positive. So an example here, if you're giving feedback to someone about their presentation skills, you could start with, when you're presenting your work to the team, I can tell you know your content inside and out, and your slides are so easy to follow. We want to essentially establish a connection with them by starting with something positive, and it helps people not get super defensive right away. It allows us to connect with them quickly. And then the other biggest piece is, don't transition with the word but or however, because this negates what you said before in communication and language. And it really, yeah, if you just notice when people say this too, if I said, wow, you did a great job on your presentation, but you really sucked at this part, it kind of hurts more, I think, too. And we want it to be either, you can just do a period between the two sentences, or it can mean and. In our example here, I then just transition to the facts of the situation. So I've noticed a few times it seems like you're rushing through the last few slides and there isn't always time for questions. So we want it to be very specific. We want it to be objective, not subjective. It should be things that they know. It shouldn't be a surprise. And then, like we talked about earlier, we want to share the impact, because again, just like on the positive side of recognition, same with this, with constructive feedback, sometimes people don't see the impact that they're making when they are doing something that you're giving feedback on. So the example here, without time for questions, we're not getting the feedback we need in the room, which is delaying our project approval to the next week. So again, keeping it very fact-based. I also like to keep it very concise too when you're giving feedback. You don't want to drag on and do long explanations or justifications, because you either might confuse them, you might lose them, or usually you're getting almost yourself too involved in it. And it's usually you're reacting to your own emotions of not wanting them to not like you, or you don't want them to feel bad. So you're like overly justifying yourself, and that actually can make it worse for both of you. So last piece, I like to come up with a plan together. So offer some questions at the end. So you're not just jumping in to say, hey, here's what you need to do specifically next, or here's how to do better. It's ask them questions. What do you think would help you have time at the end for questions? What's worked before? What's getting in the way? How can I support you with your presentations going forward? And then wrapping up with, what are our next steps? And I'm not recommending to ask all of these questions at once. That would also be overwhelming. I'm just sharing a bunch to, get your brainstorm started of each of your situations are going to be unique. And that applies for all of these examples, of course. But start with some questions. They may turn it back to you and ask what you think would be helpful for them. And then, of course, that's great to give them your thoughts, your advice. But I found, again, to be connected with this person, to make sure that they're not getting defensive. We want it to be a two-way conversation. And a lot of times if we just rush through all this and we say, you didn't do a great job on the presentation and you were rushing, we don't have questions, you need to plan better, again, is the poor example of this. And then usually the person's just shutting down and they're just going to say, yep, you're right. Okay. And then they just walk away and they're not really going to take it to heart. They're going to be probably more distraught about it. And again, it's just less productive. So we want it to be a two-way street for these conversations, and coming up with a plan together is a key part of that. And again, just like our first section, we need to be thinking about giving this feedback all throughout the year. And my first key piece of advice here when it comes to giving constructive feedback to someone throughout the year is you need to be really mindful of the timing to address it. So again, this example of giving a presentation, is it something that they need to hear about right after it? Is it something maybe you schedule a quick 15-minute feedback for the next day and give them a heads up and be really clear that you want to give them feedback about the presentation, and give them time to maybe think about their own thoughts of their own feedback as well. But a lot of times I think we just kind of rush to give us feedback either in the moment, like directly after the meeting. And again, it doesn't always get absorbed as well by the other person because they're maybe all worked up from the presentation in the moment, or they might need some time to reflect on it before they're ready to have the conversation. So be really mindful of it. And the other piece here is not to wait too long when it comes to constructive feedback. We don't want it to be something you're saving up for an annual performance review. That shouldn't be something that, oh, 6 months ago you gave a presentation and you kind of rushed through it. So I think you need to be working on these skills. Again, that is not helpful for that person. If it was 6 months ago, they need to be working on these skills all throughout the year. So they do need it quickly, but just be really intentional about how quick you're giving that feedback. And then even think about having regularly scheduled cadence for feedback, whether it's your, weekly, monthly one-on-ones that you're having. Maybe you dedicate specific time for giving feedback in those meetings, and then they are prepared for it. They're in the mindset for it, and they're probably more open to have those conversations then. And then lastly, this one is huge, is don't make it a performance review surprise when it comes to feedback. I really, really think nothing negative should be a surprise during an annual performance review. These are things and conversations you need to be having all throughout the year so that by the time the annual performance review comes, they should already know, oh, we've talked about presentations before. We've talked about these reporting deadlines before. It's okay. I know I'm continually working on it. And I understand my rating where it is because we've been talking about this all year. It shouldn't be, oh my gosh, they rated me so low because of that one presentation 6 months ago. That will get people disengaged on your team like that. And we don't want that. We want this, again, an ongoing two-way street is probably going to be the theme of today's conversation. And by the way, you should be asking for feedback from them too. If this isn't already part of your performance review, whatever system structure your company has, this is something you should go out of your way to ask for all of your team members to be giving you feedback again throughout the year, if not just the annual performance review. So don't forget that. I know it's scary. We all need it, and we all will be better off when we have feedback from the people we're working with. All right, our last section here is developing your team's growth. And I split this into 4 key categories that I see. And this is another area that a lot of people don't have these conversations in their performance reviews, or they maybe barely brush on it if their team member brings it up intentionally. But we, as the leaders, need to be thinking about these ahead of time. We need to be proactive about it. And we need to be having these conversations with each of our team members because each team member is going to be different with their needs. So we need to meet them where they're at and be really intentional with the different areas. So I like to think about it in these 4 different quadrants. So the top path here, professional development, first within the company and then externally. And then in the bottom here, we have the career paths, both within the company and externally. And we'll go through each of these more specifically. First is learning together. So professional skills within the organization, thinking about where they can learn and grow within the company that's outside of just their day-to-day responsibilities. So thinking about and keeping, a lot of this comes down to keeping an ear out in different meetings that you're in, different conversations you're having, where your team members might want to get involved. So does that look like other teams or departments within the company? Maybe someone would want to shadow someone else. They want to sit in on meetings, maybe do some internal networking, just even like coffee chats with other people to learn from different departments. Maybe there's new creative or strategic side projects that would be helpful for them to get involved in, and some long-term projects where they're working with other departments or cross-functional efforts. And then, of course, there's hopefully some sort of internal trainings within the organization where they can focus on hard or soft skills, where they can learn from other peers, or we have different classes and courses for them to learn. So again, these are things that I'm going to say this a lot today. It needs to be a two-way street where you want to be identifying these different opportunities for them, with them, but then they also need to be communicating with you what they're interested in. What are the departments that they're interested in learning from? What are different skills that they want to be learning along the way so that you can work together to come up with this? I don't expect you to come in with a specific plan for all different all three of these pieces for each of your team members. Like, we want them to be involved in it, and we want them to have excitement and a say in what they're focused on. Next is the broadened perspectives, where we're looking at external professional development opportunities. And again, another two-way street where we can help them narrow down the topics and skills that they want to be learning, but then put it on them to start researching different places that they can learn, whether it's conferences, webinars, coaches, trainings, association meetings, networking events, books, podcasts, courses. There's so many options out there. So yes, it can be overwhelming and daunting probably for your team members. So they may need some specific recommendations. They may not even know there's an association for your industry that they can get involved in, or they may not know about different networking organizations in their city. So help point them in different directions as it makes sense, and talk through different skills that they want to be learning. Next up is evolving here. So looking at their career path within the company. This is something again, I think usually gets pushed aside unless the individual comes to you and raises their hand and asks for promotion, asks for the next steps in their career or different opportunities that they're interested in. But I want you to be thinking about this before this annual review conversation comes up, so that you can start mapping this out with them, for them, and having those conversations on the back end as needed. So the two different ways I see this happening is, first, the career mapping, where is there some sort of linear plan for the position they're in now, what the natural next step would be with a promotion or promotion after that, or are there maybe 3 different roles that they could go into next that would be a promotion, and help them see what those next steps are and what it would take to get those promotions. And then on the other side too is lateral exploration. Maybe again, they want to learn about different areas of the business, or even switch departments, teams, or focus areas, and be open to those conversations and help introduce them to the people that they need to be talking with, and be supportive if they do want to apply to other roles within the organization. And then lastly here is the next chapter, when they want to pursue a different career path externally. And here, I know it can be a really difficult conversation for both sides, but I want you to think about what's in their best interest. And sometimes it really is in their best interest to leave a company, but I don't want you to take it personally. It can feel really hard as a manager for someone to leave. And I've heard from so many managers too who say, well, I spent so long investing in them and training them, and now they're just going to up and leave me, and I have to start all over with the next person. Like, yes, that can be true. But another way to think about it is that you've invested in them, you've trained them, and now they're super excited about this other opportunity, that they can take all these skills and they can do something that they're really passionate about, that really lights them up. And honestly, you don't want to keep someone on your team who doesn't want to be there, or who is personally passionate about something else. You want to be their number one cheerleader. You want to be their advocate. And personally, I wouldn't want someone to be scared to have this conversation with me. So we want to be open with them, and maybe even open that conversation with them, or open the door to that conversation, so that they feel comfortable telling you, so that you can plan better for that. So it's not a surprise if someone puts in their notice, but maybe you've been working with them for months and you know that they have a side hustle business that they're super excited about and they want to go full time on it. And maybe you two can work together on what that timeline is, and they could help train the next person if it makes sense. Whatever it is, I think it's really helpful to be on the same page with this one, so that neither of you are leaving on bad terms. All right. And similarly here, we need to be continuing this throughout the year. It shouldn't just be a once a year conversation when it comes to long-term development and growth. So figure out what that cadence that makes the most sense for you and each individual on your team, because it likely will be different for each person. Some people are super, super happy in their roles and they don't want to get to the next level. They know this is where they shine. This is where they're happiest, and they want to stay here. And that's great. We don't want to push them, because then we might push them out. So we want to see what makes most sense for each individual, and then encourage them as well to keep track of their learnings and growth. This will be helpful for both of you. So any courses they're taking, any conferences they're going to. Have them keep track of this somewhere in one place, preferably, and they can keep all their notes in one spot of all their learnings. And then again, this will be very helpful at the end of the year when it comes to performance reviews for you to have a list of all of these. And don't forget to think about if you're having these conversations with your own manager. And that's true for all of these sections, but especially this one. Are you having these 3 or 4 different areas that you're focused on with your manager to make sure that you're continuing to develop if that's something you're interested in? All right. Well, as promised, we have the free download to help hold you accountable, which we will drop in the chat, and I'll also send out as an attachment in an email with the recording in the next few days so that you'll have this. And I really want this. Again, I jammed a lot on here, so it could be a one-page cheat sheet for you going through everything that we talked about today. And if you want to keep the learnings going, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel called Hello Velocity. And from there, I have my podcast on there, and I'll also be doing some mini trainings over the next few months. The podcast season 2 is wrapping up in the next 2 weeks. So I'll be off for the next few months for that. And then I'll be transitioning to online trainings to give you ongoing support as well. And then on the right side here, I have a QR code. If you're interested in learning more about how to work with me when it comes to one-on-one coaching, this would be the place to do that. You can book a free discovery call where we can talk more specifically about your goals as a leader, what you're looking to work on, and what it would look like to work together. If you found today's content valuable and want a deep dive about your specific situation, the specific people on your team, and you want to talk through it with a trusted neutral third party, hi, that's me. I'm your person. You can book a discovery call with me, and we can talk about what it looks like to work together through one-on-one coaching, where we can have that dedicated time for you to work on these specific skills as a leader that you may never have been taught before. We can also take some time to work through strategic thinking, prioritization, delegation, or again, deep dive into today's topic about providing feedback, either specifically in your performance review season or all throughout the year. So I am your trusted partner for your leadership coaching, and you can book a discovery call today to learn more about what it looks like to work together. And before I switch to questions, here's a few more links of how to stay connected with me. So appreciate you all jumping on today, and I will stop recording so that if anyone wants to jump on and ask specific questions, you don't feel like it will be, your questions will be on YouTube. I know that can be intimidating.